Hello and welcome to yet another video, and in this video I'm still on the same topic as budget photography, specifically budget cameras, and in this video I'll be talking about this camera right here. It's the Canon EOS M3. Yes, it's been out for a while, but I think it is still a very good camera, so without further ado, let's get into the video. So the Canon EOS M3, I'm sure at this point a lot of you who are watching this video already know like what this camera can generally do and the features for both videos and stills and things like that. And the main reason why I got this camera is not to do a review on it, but actually for my budget photography series. Now that it's heading towards the end of the year, a lot of people are actually getting rid of their old cameras and also buying their new cameras. So secondhand cameras are generally cheaper at around this time of the year anyway. But in some countries you can still get it cheaper than where I am. But if you're watching this video like in spring, summer, or what have you, and if you have a little bit of a different option to choose from, then of course there will be different options and the price range will also vary. But as of now, I got this camera for 110 euros. This is actually this entire kit with the 18 to 55mm lens, as well as the electronic viewfinder, which you can detach, which I have it detached most of the time when I'm outside, simply because the saturation in this viewfinder is different from the saturation on this screen, and I find that this screen is way more accurate than this viewfinder. But it's still nice if you're outside where you cannot see the sun and you can just look through the viewfinder, and this also tilts upwards so you can shoot from a different angle. There's that. But yeah, I generally bought this camera for the budget photography series, which is a series where I actually buy budget photography camera equipment and shoot good pictures or prove to people that you still can get really nice results with these older cameras, and you don't need to spend a lot of money on the, more modern gear and everything like that. But anyway, in this video I would like to talk about the ergonomics, operational side of this camera, as well as the positive and negative and what I think about this camera by the end of the video. So let's first talk about the ergonomics and the operational side of this camera. This camera is a very, very compact camera, but don't be fooled by it. It has a lot of features, such as this built-in flash right here. It can tilt. I mean, I find it really fascinating. I'm not a huge flash photographer, but if you use this camera on really stripped down without external flash and anything, and you still want to get some nice images, especially when you're shooting event, you can always go very discreet with this small setup and just use this flash to work through the event photography. Now, of course, if you don't want to go with this lens, you can go with this kit lens. It's the 15 to 45mm lens. I reviewed this lens a long time ago together with my EOS M10 from a long time ago, and I really like this camera, by the way. It's still an amazing camera to get, but if you're shooting a lot of RAW and like to post-process and edit a lot of your files, the M3 is still much better. Moving on to the next point is you still get really nice standard mic ports, so the video on this camera is not the best in the world, but you still can get a lot of things done. It's like back to the time of the 600D, 650D, 700D, all that. It's sharper than the M10 though, I'll give it that. It's much sharper than the M10. And the great thing about Canon is that you can put the USB cable, shoot tether, not only shoot tether, but just like their other pro-level mirrorless camera and also all the other DSLRs that they produce, is that you can install your custom image profile. So if you have your flat image profile that you downloaded or created yourself, you can just use the Canon EOS Utility app on your computer, whether Mac or Windows, and just use it to download into the camera essentially. And you can also just update your firmware that way as well. But I mainly use it to put in flash picture profile, and also generally have my own picture profile that I download and save it on the camera. So that's another good thing about this operational side of this camera. The screen it's usable unless if you have something like this on, or if you have a microphone, like a shotgun mic, or a light, or some other accessories you have on here, then the screen becomes useless, but I think you already know that. But otherwise, it's a very nice touchscreen, and it is also bright enough, at least here in Northern Europe. I never really find myself using the viewfinder, the electronic viewfinder that often, and I don't need to really shield it because the light is not really strong here in Northern Europe. But I can imagine if you're in a tropical country, you might find yourself using the viewfinder more often because the screen is not bright enough. But even then, you still can judge like generally what your exposure is, or generally what your composition is. It's not that bad, and you still can you can still adjust the screen to go even brighter if you want. And the button layout, I find that the button layout is pretty nice, because it's not only that it's pretty nice and responsive, but also like even though it's clustered here, I never find myself really pressing against any of this button. Like, I guess because my hand is a bit big for this camera, is that it creates a little curve here where my thumb is, that I'm not really pressing anything. And even down here where the menu and the info button is, like you really have to press it, and there's a confirm click that you actually press it. Otherwise, you're not going to be pressing these buttons by accident. At least most of you won't, I imagine. And this wheel is also very nice and sturdy. Some of the wheels on the cheaper mirrorless cameras, even on the Sony ones, they don't feel as premium as this wheel. And this wheel, you can press. And on the wheels on some other mirrorless cameras, by putting a simple weight on it, you're already pressing the wheel into a directional pad. But the directional pad is stiff enough that when you're turning the wheel, it doesn't also press on the actual directional pad. So that's good. And you still can customize some of the buttons on here, which is really nice, especially for the camera at this price. Yeah, and the grip is actually really nice too, really nice to hold. It is a really small, versatile camera to always carry with you. Just look at the form factor. This lens is a much sharper lens, by the way. It's the 15 to 45 millimeter, and it is smaller and is wider. Unless if you have it fully extended, because right now it's on its folding mode, then you know it is roughly the same height, and it goes lower and higher. But yeah, that's that lens for you. But it is also lighter, and it is sharper. But anyway, back to this camera. It is overall a really nice small camera, and being the APS-C size sensor, I would also recommend getting the 22mm f2. I sold that lens because I thought I wanted to get rid of all my M cameras, but then I never got rid of my M system. So yeah, I'm thinking of actually getting that lens back, like buying a new one. So yeah. Having the APS-C size sensor, as I said earlier, is really nice because for such a small compact camera, you're still getting a lot of light and a lot of sensitivity in low light, and this camera is still really good in low light situation. At least if you're doing just your personal travel video, travel photo, and just general personal things, maybe some professional things. I have taken this camera as a backup to some of my professional shoots before, but never actually got a chance to use it. But I think it's also like a testament to still how much I trust this camera, because you know, you wouldn't really take a camera as your backup camera somewhere to a professional job unless you also trust that camera as much as your main camera. It's just that if you already have several main cameras in the field, then you know there's very little to no chance of using a backup camera anyway, which is good, meaning that my main cameras are still very reliable. But yeah, anyway, another operational side that I find not so good is the SD card slot, which is down here. It shares the same compartment with the battery card door, which on the M10 it's a separate card door, which is what I like better, but that's just me. I like to be able to access my card a lot quicker and a lot faster, and no need to unscrew the camera from the tripod mount if I have the tripod mount mounted on, because if I have the tripod mount mounted on the camera, I generally like to actually keep it there. So now into the positive and negative. This is just covering both video and photography, so let's talk about the negative first. The negative is, well, it's an older sensor, and that means that the type of file you're getting is a much older file. There's not that much detail compared to the newer files, like from the newer cameras. By detail, I don't mean like the resolution detail, but detail of the subject you're taking pictures of, like if you're recovering shadows, highlights, things like that, the newer cameras will obviously do a much better job of recovering those details without losing too much highlights or without gaining back too much noise. And this camera, like, it is able to recover a lot of highlights, but when you're recovering a lot of shadows, it's that old typical Canon noise that will pop up after recovering 50% of the shadows. So just keep that in mind. And the older Canon noise looks a bit more digital, whereas, you know, post 2016 the Canon noise actually improved, unless if you're using the 5D Mark III from 2012, which the noise still looks quite nice even when you recover it. But with this camera, it still have the old typical Canon noise on the image when you recover it, and for videos you cannot really recover it that much. The bitrate is not really high anyway, but you still can install, as I mentioned, flat color profiles into this camera via the EOS utility if you download third-party, and then you can just shoot flat, and then from there, depending on the ISO you shoot, it can be noisy, but it can also be really nice to recover many of those areas, because it will definitely show a lot more detail image, and also let the camera see a lot and like show you a lot more what the camera sees, versus if you just set it yourself in the menu that, okay, you want it flat, it's still not as flat as a real flat profile that you download from some of the companies that produces free flat profile for your camera. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, otherwise there aren't really a lot of negative I can say about this camera. The video is still very Canon from 2000, like from the 600D, 650D, 700D, is that there are still a lot of aliasing and moire. I can say that, but I think it's also good enough to do some simple professional shoots. If your professional shoot is like a budget professional shoot, I think this camera is also good enough for it. Like, let's say if you're doing a budget, like super budget conference meeting video, or a really super budget music video, super budget just super budget work generally, you can really get a lot of work done with this camera. A lot of people I know actually back in the day also have used this camera to shoot some professional videos, so why not? And of course this is a much newer camera, the M50, and has much better video even in 1080p, but the resolution, I still use this camera professionally a lot of times. So I guess it's also like a testament to the actual M system, even the M before this M. And while I'm touching this camera, why not we just go into the positive, because I really don't have a lot of negative on this camera, apart from the last part, which is the battery life. The battery life is not that good on here, so you might want to have 2 or 3 extra batteries, but nowadays they're sold for pretty cheaply, even from a reputable third-party brand. It's still very cheap nowadays, so yeah, highly recommend it. Anyway, now into the positive is that it still takes a lot of the EF and the EFS glass, so if you have a lot of those laying around somewhere from whatever, and you can still get those secondhand for really cheap nowadays, it will work perfectly fine on this camera. The autofocusing speed will maintain the same autofocusing speed as the native EF-M lenses, which is brilliant in my opinion. Now, I haven't tested a lot of lenses, but I tested a lot of shallow aperture lenses like the f1.4, f1.2, and it worked fine. So I think it's also a testament to, you know, how good the autofocusing system on this camera is for photography. For video though, the autofocusing system is not so great, so back to the negative, but that's, I promise it's the last negative, is that the autofocusing system is not so great in video. It's much better than EOS M10, and I guess if you're vlogging, you can rely it more often than the M10, but you wouldn't want to rely on it for 100% of the time. But yeah. Anyway, onto another positive point is that because of the bigger sensor, you can get a lot of shallow depth of field, and it also allows you to shoot a lot in low light. Maybe not to today's standard of low light, but still low enough. Let's say if you're in a bar or in a pub, you still can get your job done, whether you're shooting video or stills. Now, of course, this also comes down heavily to the lenses that you have. If you have the 22mm f2, then yes, of course, that's going to work fine. It's sharp at f2, and it allows in a lot of light into the camera. But if you're working with something like the 15 to 45mm and you're at the 45mm and that's like 6.3, then of course it's going to be very noisy and very dark and dim. So yeah, take that for consideration. And another positive is the operational, like the touch screen itself. I guess I should have talked about that in the operational side, but anyway, the touchscreen is really good and responsive even in cold weather. Right now it's winter here in Northern Europe. Well, I live in the Netherlands, but I also go back and forth between Germany and the Netherlands because my parents live in the in Germany. So yeah, but the operational part on the screen, it still functions even when the temperature is really low here for Northern Europe at least. So yeah, to my conclusion, if you really want a camera that does okay video, actually still good video if you want to color grade a little bit, but still takes amazing images and you want to work with your raw files, then yeah, this camera, you can't really go wrong. You can learn a lot from this camera if you're a beginner, or have this camera as your backup camera if you're on a Canon system. Even on a Canon M system, you might have an M6, M6 Mark II, what have you, and you want a backup camera. This is perfectly fine as a backup camera, because it still will get your work done, get your job done. I mean, I have used this I have used it as a backup camera for my job before, so it's a testament to how much I trust it. But yeah, it's not much to really complain. If you can live with the moire and aliasing in video especially, then I guess this is really great. It's a small size camera that can easily fit anywhere, so yeah, there's that. I guess before I start talking too long, another positive is the color depth and the color science is still really great. It's not like the newer M6 Mark II kind of color science or even the EOS R color science, but it's still a nice Canon color science. So if you're doing a lot of portraits and landscape, then this camera will also deliver really nice results. And if you're only JPEG user, then of course Canon is famous for their JPEGs. So you can't go wrong either. Anyway, before I talk too long, then I better end it here. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe. If you need a free photography guidebook, it's linked down in the description below. It's on my website. It's absolutely for free. You don't need to send me your email. You don't need to pay me anything. You will not receive any newsletter, none of those crap. So yeah, anyway, bye for now.